Sophia.Benson. I'm in the Rockin' Ranchers 4-H Club, and my presentation is called The Unwanted Horse. It was estimated that there were over 170,000 neglected horses in the United States in 2007. We have all heard about what horse neglect is, but how much do we really know about it? I chose this topic because Alaska can be a very harsh climate and a very difficult place to keep a horse, and as a result, some horses aren't getting the proper care and attention that they might need. Today, I'm going to go over with you what is horse neglect and what causes it, why neglect is such a big problem, and how you can help unwanted horses. The direct definition of horse neglect is ignoring or failing to meet the animal's needs. Horse neglect isn't always your stereotypical starving animal, like this one here. It can occur in many forms. It can, for an example, maybe an owner doesn't actually know how much to feed their horse and feeds it too much, so the animal might be obese. Or another scenario would be that they leave the halter on the horse for too long, and as a result, it might get burrowed into the horse's skin and they'd have to cut it off the horse. So it doesn't always look like this. It can be a variety of different things. So what can cause horse neglect? One of the first leading causes of horse neglect is owner ignorance. Owner ignorance is when the owner doesn't have enough knowledge or might not be educated enough on how to take care of an animal like a horse. Horses require a lot of care and attention, and sometimes people don't always realize this when they take on this commitment. Horses require a ton of expenses too, which is why another cause of horse neglect can be financial setbacks. So a cause of financial setbacks might be that someone bought a horse on a pretty tight budget and they lost their source of income and didn't really have a backup fund on taking care of their horse. So now they have a horse that they can't pay for its food or water or can't find a place to board it, and they can't really take care of it anymore. And finally, another cause of neglect is apathy. Apathy is the general loss of interest in something. So maybe someone bought a horse because they thought it would be a fun project or something that would be fun to do for their kid, and didn't really think it through all the way. Maybe eventually the spark would sort of wear off and the horse would be ignored or maybe not get enough attention and become more of a lawn ornament than of a pet that needs taken care of. So why is neglect such a big problem? Horse neglect is considered a criminal offense or a civil offense in all 50 states. However, the laws vary on how harsh or lenient they might be. Horse neglect is an extremely awkward topic, and it's very hard to get an actual number on how many horses there are that are neglected every year. The problem with neglect is it's not really about what we do know, it's more about what we don't know. So since we don't really have an accurate number of how many horses are actually being neglected, because it's so hard for people to report cases, especially if they know the owner of the horse who is being neglected, it can be really hard for people to actually talk about this, since it's really, it's a pretty glossed over in the horse world. Also, horse neglect, 90% of all abuse cases are actually neglect, so it's really a problem with people not knowing how to take care of their horse. So how does the law work? All 50 states have a law on the neglect of animals and protecting the animals. So it works like this. First, a complaint is made. So maybe someone will be driving by and see a pasture of horses that they think are not being taken care of properly. They will call an official and need some form of evidence, for example, a photo, and they will then, and an official would be someone like a vet or maybe the police. The officer would come down to the property to investigate, and then if evidence of wrongdoing or crime is found, they can obtain a search warrant and a seizure warrant to seize the horses and possibly the owner. If the owner is found guilty, they will face fines, restitution, and possibly time in jail depending on how severe the situation is. So obviously the law seems like it's pretty strong and should prevent people from doing this. So why are there still cases of neglect? This is because the officer cannot even consider the seizure of horses unless the horse is in one of these possible three situations. One might be that the owner and the officer have talked, and the owner has stated that they cannot make any changes to the horse's current situation. Another situation would be that the horse is about to die without immediate intervention. And a third would be that the owner and the officer have talked, and the owner is not making any changes, and the situation is still deteriorating. So also, seizing horses is an extremely long and expensive process. We had a case in Alaska where horses were seized a couple years back, and it cost the borough almost $30,000 to $40,000. So it's not an easy task. This is because the borough doesn't really have these things on hand. They will need to pay for things like a horse trailer, halters and lead ropes, even portable fence panels to help corral horses into a trailer if they don't know how to lead or can't lead very well. They also will need to pay for the assistance of equine professionals, who are people like vets or trainers who know how to handle horses in this situation. They're also going to need to have a place for the horse to stay long term. For example, we have a couple organizations in Alaska, like the Alaska Equine Rescue, which is mainly housed in Anchorage, but it is kind of speckled all over the state, if you will, where there are small farms that will take horses in if they need to. And so they will need to pay for a place like that for a horse to stay long term. And finally, if legal action is about to be taken, where someone may want to sue the owner of the neglected horse, they will need to pay for the time of officials like attorneys and judges. So as you can see, it is not the law that is at fault, it's more of the process of carrying out the law that is long, messy, and extremely expensive. So let's say a neglected horse was found and someone brought it in, and it has been seized and now it's sitting somewhere. So what are his options now? The first thing that they will try to do for the horse is send it to a rescue facility. Rescue facilities are places for the horse to stay temporarily or long term, where they try to rehabilitate the horse and get it back into tip-top condition. Rescue facilities can vary from being a huge complex where there are individual caretakers for every horse and huge stalls where every horse has plenty of space in each stall. However, they can also be smaller operations where there might be where the horses are pastured throughout the year, and they have a main run-in shelter that they can go into to take shelter from the elements. Despite how big or fancy they might be, all rescue facilities have to follow the same guidelines. For example, the horses need to have a vet check every 24 hours, and they also must have fencing that does not cause any potential harm to the animal, and horses must also be able to interact with each other. Another option for the horse is adoption. So this usually comes later, once the horse has been at his rescue facility for a while and it's back into good condition. Sometimes once the horse is seized, it might be put up for adoption, but usually since this doesn't happen, because usually the horse is in pretty bad shape, it can't be adopted right away. Adoption is great in its intentions, however, sometimes it doesn't always go as well. Previously neglected horses or previously abused horses can be a little harder to trust humans. So it's better usually for a more advanced rider who knows the horse pretty well to take it on. Sometimes people buy a horse who has been neglected previously without really thinking through the commitment, and might not really have a plan set up when the horse may spiral back into its previous situation. Finally, there's euthanasia. Putting the animal down is the last option that isn't really considered until all the other possible situations for the horse have been completely exhausted. There was a case I read recently about a mare who was about 17 to 20 years old. They couldn't really tell. She was a quarter horse mare, and she was found tied to a tree in direct sunlight in a roadside in Ontario. And she was only noticed because a few passing motorists happened to go by and see her. They called the police, who came down and investigated, and they had no idea how long she had been out in the sun, but she was severely dehydrated. So when they got her to a rescue facility, they could not do anything for her. She was simply too dehydrated and could not be rehabilitated at this point, so they were forced to put her down. It's not necessarily the prettiest option, but sometimes it's best because it's really better just to do that instead of let the horse continue suffering. So how can you help unwanted horses? So now that we know what a terrible situation neglect is, how can we help unwanted horses? One of the best things you can do is to stay out of the situation entirely. So if you are thinking about buying a horse, make sure that you have a plan set up. So if you have a horse who might be a little bit more accident prone and get injured quite often, then you might want to have a backup fund to pay for possible vet bills for your horse. Also, if you have never bought a horse before, you might want to seek assistance from someone who has done this in the past. For example, a trainer or someone who might own a horse breeding operation, or maybe the person who owns the stable you board at. They can help guide you through the process and make sure you wind up with the horse that is right for you and don't end up in a situation where you can't take care of it. Another great way that you can help horses is to be a good horse seller. What this means is that when you buy a horse, you have essentially made a commitment to it where you are going to take the best care of it that you can until you can't own it any longer. So if you can't take care of your horse anymore, when you're selling it, make sure that you send it to a good place. It's really it's important that you do this because if you don't really know or trust the person that you're selling your horse to, it could wind up in a really bad situation again. Another great way to help unwanted horses is to donate money to organizations. So the Alaska Equine Rescue is a great place to help out because almost all of these organizations that are rehabilitation areas or rescue facilities are entirely nonprofit organizations. So they essentially run afloat on the help of volunteers and the money from donations, which leads me to my next way to help out, which is getting involved or volunteering. If you're an experienced horseman, this would be great for you because you can help out with training horses who have been in bad situations previously. And finally, recognize when you need help. If you are in a situation and you realize that you're having trouble taking care of your horse, one of the best things that you can do for your horse is to sell it to a place where they'll be able to take care of it. So we have, at the barn that I board at, recently they bought a rescue pony who they bought at the animal shelter, who they had actually heard about her previously, and they knew that she was a really good trail horse, and they knew a lot about her. So when they found out that she was in the animal shelter, they decided that it would be a great option to buy her. She was sent to the animal shelter mainly because the owner realized that she could not take care of her horse anymore and decided to bring her there. So this is really, I think it's a really feel-good, heartwarming story because it shows that the owner loved the horse enough to, instead of try to help it out anymore, they decided to sell the horse because they knew that they couldn't take care of it any longer. So in conclusion, horse neglect is a pretty hot topic. It can spark up some pretty heated conversations because some people are very opinionated about it. I learned a lot while I was doing this presentation, and I hope it left some effect on you, and now you can realize the gravity of the situation that our horses are sometimes in. I would like to thank my 4-H leaders, Connie Seekins, Beth Austin, and Chris Worker for giving me so much amazing feedback and help on this presentation. I also would like to thank my family and my 4-H group for being a great audience while I was practicing this presentation. And I would also like to thank John Teemison because he gave me a great perspective on helping to understand the law. And thank you for listening. These are all of the sources that I used while I was doing my project. Are there any questions?
So, have you seen a case of abuse?
The question was, have I seen a case of abuse? I actually have not necessarily seen a case of abuse. There's a possibility that I have and I just didn't recognize it. There was recently, my family went on a vacation to Costa Rica and we were doing a little driving around, going to a different place. We were probably driving back from the beach or something, but we actually did see some horses in a pasture who looked like they were in some pretty bad shape. However, we did not know the situation, so we couldn't really make any judgment on it. But I do know my parents have seen cases of abuse in Alaska, and my mom grew up in Canada, and she has seen cases of neglect and abuse before.
Okay. So, what would you do if you came across a case of abuse?
The question was, what would I do if I came across a case of abuse? The first thing I would do was I wouldn't jump to conclusions about it. I would definitely keep it on my mind because I didn't really know what's going on, but I would try to get a better perspective of it. So I would probably talk to someone who knew a bit more about the horses. So farriers are actually great people to talk to about this because they go around town, they're getting called by all sorts of people, and they know a lot about all the different horses and the stories behind it. So if the farrier knew little to nothing about the horse, I might be a little suspicious. I would make sure that I had evidence if I was actually going to make a complaint and I was certain that there was a case of neglect going on. And I would try to make sure I could get involved safely without causing any harm to anyone who might own the horses or try to offend anyone.
So in your film here, or your presentation, I see that you had a lot of neglect as far as probably feeding and that. The horses were skinny. What about the reverse?
The question was, I have a lot of things in my presentation about horses who are being underfed, so what's really the perspective on the other side of this. So the reverse. Well, plenty of people, as I said already, it's not really about what we do know, it's about what we don't know. So sometimes someone may buy a horse and the reason why horses may be overfed and why it's considered a form of neglect is because the person might not know that they are overfeeding their horse, and it can be to the point of obesity where the horse is dangerously overweight. And so it really happens almost all cases of neglect because the owner doesn't know what's going on, so they don't realize that the horse is actually drastically overweight.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.